The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, Sean and special guest Raquel review Vital Lacerda's latest game, Lisboa, while Alex heads out to Philly to provide PAX Unplugged coverage for the Dukes. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
Delicious. So delicious, it reminds me of a Philly cheesesteak. But hey, that's not the name of this episode. This is episode 164, Philly Cheesequake. That name, courtesy Chris Holm over on our Board Game Geek Guild. Makes perfect sense because, of course, I guess you are no longer in Philadelphia, right? Or you will. You're currently not in Philadelphia, but you will be.
Yeah, I'm currently not in Philadelphia. I will be in Philadelphia sometime during this episode recording, and then back by the time the episode drops.
Beautiful. So yeah, we're talking about PAX Unplugged, and then Lisboa, which is all about an earthquake and tsunami and fire and all sorts of stuff. So Philly cheese quake instead of cheesecake. Did I say cheesesteak? Actually, they both work, right?
Yeah, they both work. That's why it's a great name.
Is there such thing as a Philly cheesecake?
I think it's more New York cheesecake.
It's New York. But yes, there's
Maybe.
A Philly cheesesteak. So I was right the first time, even though I was wrong in my head and right. Okay. We are off the rails, Alex, already.
Yeah, didn't take long.
So anyway, we get a lot of help over on our guild number 2008 over on Board Game Geek for naming all of these episodes and discussing what we're going to talk about over on the Dukes on Deck. So be sure to check that out, and we'll give you our runners up at the end of the episode. So Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing quite well. It is going to be a very, very busy week for me, as listeners may hear later on in this episode. Having to prep to run a booth and also make the trip out there and hopefully meet a bunch of folks, listeners, other folks I know in the hobby, and excited to do it. But it is going to be a ton of work.
Yeah, and this is the time I would be really busy trying to finish up things at work so I can go to BGG-Con, except, not going this year.
Womp womp.
Is that good? Is that good?
Yeah, that wasn't bad.
Yeah, it was a little off key. A little tone deaf, but that's right. Yeah, so I've had no shortage of people either messaging me on Facebook or tweeting at me or direct messaging me saying, "Hey, you're still going to be at BGG-Con?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Super bummed, but I've had quite the year for board game related traveling, and I just need to take some time off to work. Take time off to work. That sounds oxymoronic, but...
Well,
yeah.
and I had tickets to BGG-Con too, and then when I got hired over at Grey Fox and found out we were doing PAX, that changed my plans as well. So I felt a little tinge of sadness selling that ticket. That was a fun event last year.
Yeah, no, I love BGG. I think it's really my favorite. I know it's Raquel's favorite con, and yeah, it's a shame, but we'll see. We'll see how next year goes, and I hope everyone has had a great time at BGG and PAX Unplugged. So Alex, this is a bit of an odd episode for us. You are not doing the featured review. We are not doing a news segment. We're just going to be kind of talking about our recent plays. Then we'll be throwing it over to Raquel and I for a featured review of Lisboa. And then we'll be throwing it over to you for some kind of coverage of PAX Unplugged.
I hope it's great. Obviously, we're at a point in time where I haven't done it yet, but I don't know. Tune in later. Maybe it'll be awesome. Maybe it'll be disappointing. We'll find out.
And by the way, we just equipped you with a new digital recorder for you to use out there. And we're able to do that thanks to our awesome supporters over on Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Dukes of Dice, you could join all of our awesome Patreon backers who help us out every episode by supporting the show and enable us to make new purchases for equipment and show hosting and all sorts of stuff. So I'm excited. You actually have a better digital recorder now than I do.
I will anyway. I haven't gotten it yet, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I have to try that baby out.
It's shipping to your hotel.
Yeah. Well, but I'm not there yet.
I know. We're just playing with all sorts of temporal craziness right now.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I hope it gets there.
Hey, you want to talk about recent plays?
Let's do that. So, Alex, why don't you lead us off?
So, for folks who don't know, we had both been playing in separate Charterstone campaigns, just released our review of that, a couple episodes back now, and in the intervening time, I should say, I was able to wrap up my campaign of Charterstone. I was playing that one with Jamie Stegmeyer, the designer. We finally finished. There were some travel plans that got in the way of things, and hey, Sean, I won. I beat Jamie at his own game, literally, and that made me smile. But also, the game made me smile and continued to make me smile. I initially gave this one a 5, and some people questioned whether that was a shaky 5 or not on the review, and I could understand a little bit of why. The last 4 plays of this solidified my score of this. Now, Sean, I have something interesting that comes up, because we can't talk too much about details of this for fear of spoilers, but I did have a question for you about an idea of something that hit me.
Okay.
And I was realizing we were comparing this a lot to something like Pandemic Legacy or Seafall because it has the Legacy title in there. If this were called, instead of a legacy game, a game-building game,
Okay.
do you think it would have benefited from that comparison a little more? That folks wouldn't have compared it on story so much, wouldn't have held it up to that standard of Pandemic Legacy, and maybe the game might have gotten a bit of a different perception from folks?
Yes, absolutely. I think by merely using legacy, you are placing a bunch of expectations on the game, right or wrong. And we kind of touched on that. And I know there was some discussion of reviews of the game where a lot of reviewers, ourselves included, were expecting more of a narrative element. Because I think that my perception, I'll just speak for myself. My perception was a legacy game has increasing rules, the changing of rules, what you do in one game affects the next, and there's some sort of narrative hook, so you feel like you're having an impact on the game. So I think Charterstone had 2 of those 3 things, a little bit of that third, but I think that if it used something different, a different terminology, then it wouldn't invite those comparisons as readily.
I will say I enjoyed it, and I do think, we haven't tried playing it after the campaign is complete, I do think it would be a playable and probably decently enjoyable game afterwards. So the claims that you can play this when you're done, I think are actually pretty well founded. Sean, have you finished your campaign of this yet?
No, and I'm super bummed. So we had 1 week we had Nick leave town. Matthew's been super busy at the kiosk. He is helping. He's running the kiosk for Empire that they're running this Christmas at the mall. And so he's been super busy. We had Extra Life, which I'll kind of briefly mention here in a second. And Nick was unfortunately out of town for that. So we just haven't been able to get it together. But I'm super excited to finish it. I think we all are. Maybe Matthew not as much, but I think the rest of us are. And I'm still really excited to pick up a recharge pack and play it with Raquel and Mariah. So I'm still itching to play it.
This better not be a Pandemic Legacy Season 1 kind of situation where we get to a certain point in the campaign and then never come back to it ever again.
No, it's fine. I'm gonna play Pandemic Legacy Season 1 all the way through with Raquel and Mariah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, board game cheating.
You were supposed to come back for Extra Life.
I wasn't. Absolutely not. Good sir.
Yes, that was in the discussion at one point.
Okay, well,
just because you have selective memory.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yes, that totally has something to do with it. What?
Anyway, that's Charterstone. I came, I saw, I conquered, but it was a lot of fun in the meantime, and everyone at the table seemed to enjoy it too. So great playing that campaign with Jamie, and hey, check it out. I definitely stand by the 5 I gave it. So that's Charterstone.
Very cool. Well, we had Extra Life this last weekend or the weekend before, 2 weekends before, I guess. And I really apologize. I did a pretty poor job of promoting it ahead of time. I mean, usually, we're both promoting it weeks and weeks in advance, but then again, we're both usually here together for it. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported Extra Life and supported the Dukes, the Duke team for Extra Life. We had several people donate money. If you don't know, basically it benefits a local Children's Miracle Network hospital for us here in the Duke City. That is the University of New Mexico Children's Hospital. So it was a lot of fun. I played, I think, 15 different games, 15 unique games. Ton of fun. And because we weren't doing our hourly update like we've done in years past, I actually got to play a bunch of older games. I wasn't trying as hard to play a bunch of newer stuff. So that definitely made for a very different Extra Life experience. And I think it was a little bit easier on the old noggin because I wasn't constantly having to learn and or teach new stuff, right? Like that kind of helped. But that's not to say that there weren't some new games that came out. For example, I got to play Photosynthesis from Blue Orange Games. This is designed by Hjalmar Hach. I think I said that 80% correct. That's Hjalmar, and then last name Hach, Hach. And this is a beautiful game. The art is beautiful. The graphic design is beautiful, but there is a certain 3D element to the game. Basically, you are controlling a particular species of tree in this forest, and you are trying to benefit the most from the positioning of the sun. It's called photosynthesis because you are trying to get as much sunlight as possible to grow your trees and eventually kind of harvest them to get the most points. So you have all of these different 3D trees, and they're basically just these cardboard pieces that are kind of two parts you stick together, so it's, you know, an X and Y axis type thing, and it looks beautiful on the table. So what you're able to do is you're able to basically get these sun points, these light points, and you're able to spend them in such a way that you either get access to new seeds or to plant the seeds onto certain parts of the board, or to grow a seed into a level 1 tree, a level 1 into a level 2, a level 2 into a level 3, and then eventually harvest a level 3 tree to get points for doing so. But the really cool thing is that as you're doing this, the position of the sun is rotating around the board. And so at the start of a round, you're going to score a number of light points equal to the level of each tree that's receiving sunlight. So if I have a level 3, a level 2, and a level 1 tree, I'm going to get 6 points for me to be able to play with on my turn. However, trees can block the line of sight of where the sun's coming from. They cast shade, right? They have these shadows. And so a level 3 tree is definitely going to cast shadow on a level 1 tree, but not vice versa. So my level 3 tree, if it's tall enough, is still going to get the light, even though there might be a level 1 tree that's intervening. So it's an interesting kind of placement that you have there. This was really interesting. I think it was good, but at the end of the day, I thought it might have been just a little too simple, a little too straightforward. There's a kind of engine building in that as you're building these trees up, you're getting more and more points, but then the rotation of the sun is kind of throwing that for a loop. It was good. It was almost a little too long. I played it 3 players, and basically there's 3 rounds, 3 rotations of the sun. I think it's either 6 or 8 different positions per round. I think it's 6. So basically that's 18 rounds, you get 18 turns. And it was fine, but it just felt kind of samey. And I think this is, like we've kind of talked about before, this is more an Alex game than a Sean game. But I'm curious to see what you will think about it when you give this a shot, because it was good and it was interesting, but it was just okay in the end. But it's beautiful. I think it looks fantastic.
I think this is one where it might end up being more clever than fun. I have to play it, but based on your feedback and other feedback I've heard, that's the sense I've had of this game. I'll have to give it a try. I think it's kind of a must play at a certain point, just because it seems to be pretty well talked about these days. But yeah, that's my impression of it looking from afar.
Yeah. So that is Photosynthesis from Blue Orange Games.
I got into play of something from Essen that we brought over. Not something signed by Grey Fox, to be clear, but just something that got brought back by our Essen crew. And this was Blackwood. It's published by Runes Editions, designed by Philippe Tapimoquet. And this game, Sean, looks absolutely gorgeous. It's a kind of broom service-esque, but a little bit darker. Basically, you're sending marionettes that you control into the woods to get you ingredients to make potions. And then the potions you can use to make spells, or you can sell them for money. And it is an economic game with sort of a 3D forest element, is the best way I could describe it. The cards will continually shift, these ingredient cards, as you take them. It's worker placement with a little element of sort of set collection, sort of action efficiency. Basically, the potions that you get you points, as I mentioned. The spells you can get as a result of those can get you extra abilities, like the ability to place 2 of your workers at once, or the ability to get fill an ingredient on a potion card that you don't have. And it was interesting. It was one of those where the graphic design of things actually held it back because they were trying to be a little too thematic. They were trying to have these different items that you get, whether it's a frog, a toad, a bat, on the card. They were trying to have them in the spots that they would be on the card. So the bat's up in the sky, the toad's on the ground. The problem is they blended in too much with the backgrounds of the cards, this sort of dark forest. And so it was hard to see what you would actually get from different things. So there was a lot of leaning over and looking closely and, do I have this? Can I fulfill this? And it led to what could have been a nice, elegant, awesome experience with gorgeous art. It bogged it down, oddly enough, on graphic design of all things, just because those ingredients didn't pop quite as much as you might want them to. Played decently quickly, but there was kind of a whole table after playing it. So that's Blackwood. Just check it out for the art alone, because I think this style is stunning. Looks absolutely gorgeous, and we'll see if it gets picked up for U.S. distribution by someone. But it looks pretty good for sure.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to talk about one more game, but before I do, just want to real quick go over the list of the rest of the games I played at Extra Life. Played Queen Domino, which I expect we'll be reviewing at some point in the near future. Got a bunch of plays of Happy Salmon. Got some plays of Motainai, 3-player. Got to play Combat Commander Europe, one of my top 10 games. Fake Artist Goes to New York. I got to play Imperial Settlers with the Aztecs expansion, which I'll be probably talking about in the future recent plays. Let's see, Tournament Camelot, which was a fantastic trick-taking game. And then some Hero Realms and, some 7 Ronin from a little company called Grey Fox Games. Don't say anything.
Your check's in the mail.
Move on. Yep. Great. Perfect. And then actually started off the day with some High Frontier, just teaching the intro game, which you heard our buddy Mike Canavan talk about a couple weeks ago on the show. So yeah, High Frontier was pretty awesome. So yeah. But the last game that I'm going to talk about is a game that I have avoided playing. I mean, I have made it a conscious decision to not play this game. And
even though you would think you would like it.
Yes, absolutely. And that game is Secret Hitler. And now, okay, we've kind of talked about this before. You've mentioned this on the show because you've played it in the past, and we've talked about it before, like in news when it was on Kickstarter, I think at one point. And I am of the opinion that when they chose this theme, when they chose the title, they knew what they were doing. They were choosing this to be provocative so that it would get more attention, so that they would sell more copies, etc. And at the time, when this first came out from Kickstarter, you would see pictures on Twitter of people doing the Nazi salute, of people doing the Hitler mustache, and I just found it really distasteful, and so I avoided this game like the plague, knowing full well that I would probably like it quite a bit. And then I think the last time we brought this up on the show, we had a bunch of listeners reach out and post things on the Guild, basically saying, hey, if you want to play this game, there are all of these different skins you could put on it. There's like Secret Sith and there's like Secret Voldemort. And I'm like, cool. All right, that sounds cool. So anyway, Rory picked up a bunch of these to sell at the shop and to sell at the kiosk. And so we went over for a kind of dinner party with Rory and his girlfriend and another couple. And he said, hey, I got Secret Hitler. I hear it's really good. We should totally play it. And so now I'm in a position where I don't want to impose my choices on everyone else, so to speak. And I kind of put up a half-hearted, like, I don't really feel like doing this. But I didn't want to derail what everyone else wanted to do. And again, that's not to say there's no judgment if you choose to play Secret Hitler. I'm not like, oh, you're a terrible person. By no stretch of the imagination. It's just something that I wasn't willing to do. So we played 5 games of Secret Hitler. I was on the winning team 4 out of 5 times.
Only 4 out of 5, Sean?
Well, and
That's
I'll explain why in a second. So let me say this. Secret Hitler is really good. It is quite good. I have been looking for a social deduction game that, in my opinion, either approaches or exceeds the Resistance Avalon. This approaches it, and maybe it's almost as good. I still like the Resistance Avalon better, but this has come far closer than any other social deduction game. basically what you're trying to do is it depends. If you get dealt the secret identity of a fascist or a liberal, you're trying to enact a certain number of policies of that faction. And so there's kind of a team selection element where one of you is a rotating president and then you're choosing a chancellor. And if that gets voted in, then you're going to have a choice of these 3 policies. The president looks at the 3, discards 1, hands the remaining 2 to the chancellor, who picks the final one, which is the one that's enacted. There's some special powers that might get then invoked depending on what happens. And you're just trying to deduce who is a liberal. I mean, everyone's claiming to be a liberal. And then who is a fascist, and of those fascists, who is Hitler. And basically a certain number of policies get enacted, one side wins. Or if you're able to assassinate Hitler, the liberals win. It was good. And in social deduction fashion, in typical Resistance Avalon fashion, I was really good at this game. I mean, I'm pretty good at making these deductions and figuring out what's what. And so one game, I was the first president, and I picked Rory as the chancellor. And I was a liberal, okay? So I don't know what anyone else is. And so I picked Rory, and I drew my 3 policies: liberal, fascist. Because, by the way, there's twice as many fascist policies as there are liberal policies.
Right.
So as a liberal, I give Rory the option. I discard one of the fascist policies. I announce what I'm doing. I say, everybody, I'm discarding a fascist policy. No one has any way to verify that. I hand Rory the liberal and the fascist policy. I say, okay, I'm giving Rory the choice. All right? No, again, no one has any way to know if that's true or not. He looks at both of them and he says, he's lying. He has not given me a choice, and he flips over the fascist policy. So right there, I say, okay, cool. So Rory's totally lying, but you guys have no way of knowing that. At this point, quarantine both of us, because I'm doing this for the greater good, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, quarantine both of us. So we proceed through. We're making all of these assumptions, all of the decisions based on the fact that either Rory or I is one of the fascists. At a certain point, we know that he might be Hitler or something. But basically, we have what we think is perfect knowledge, perfect information. And then I get the sinking suspicion, oh crap, I think Rory's trolling. I think he's a liberal.
Oh, no.
Who, for whatever reason, wanted to throw doubt on me. And so at a certain point, we say, okay, it has to be this. This has to be it. As long as we do this, the liberals, we're going to win the game. And we lose. We lose
Rory.
Because Rory was a liberal, but didn't want me to have influence over the game. Even though I still kind of controlled the game, And I went back and I double checked, because like in Resistance, if you're loyal, you can't intentionally play a fail. I didn't see any rule to that effect in Secret Hitler, that you had to play a liberal policy.
Interesting.
So yeah. So that was the one game I was not on the winning side for, but I think otherwise I probably would have been.
Well, in fairness, I kind of understand Rory tanking you a little bit, because you need to be cut down to size for that. Just a little bit.
What?
Yeah.
But he hurt himself. He hurt himself.
He did for the greater good, Sean.
No, it wasn't for the greater good.
The greater table good. So having you win every game. So
let me put it this way. I like this game quite a bit. I am now going to make the effort, though, to make an alternate, to do a print and play alternate version. I think it's a beautiful production. I think that if you don't have your own personal hang up with it and you have a group that's fine with it, go nuts. I think it's a beautiful production. But I'll probably be doing Secret Sith or something. So
makes sense.
But anyway, that's Secret Hitler. So yeah, that's going to do it for Secret Hitler. And I think that's going to do it for our recent plays. We're going to kind of skip the news this week, and we're going to head over to Raquel and I for our featured review of Lisboa.
Talk to you later.
So we're fortunate enough to be sponsored by Arcane Wonders, and Arcane Wonders has an impressive line of games. Not only are they the home to the Dice Tower's Essential line, but they have other fantastic games like Spoils of War, Mage Wars Academy, and Mage Wars Arena. Now, of course, they're also the home of the Dice Tower Essentials line, a line of games handpicked by Tom Vassell as essential games that every gamer should own. They started it off with the amazing Sheriff of Nottingham, plus they have the Merry Men expansion for that as well. They followed that up with games like Royals, Onitama, Speechless, and viral. Arcane Wonders has a game for every type of gamer out there. Be sure to check out all their awesome titles over at arcanewonders.com. This week, the Dukes are joined by special guest reviewer Raquel the Duchess Garcia. Raquel's pinch hitting for Alex, kind of like in Baseball Highlights 2045. First mention, when your city is in ruins after a flood, fire, and earthquake, do you have the civic pride to clean up your city? We'll find out in Lisboa. Lisboa is one of the new, heavy, crunchy games from designer Vital Lacerda and published by Eagle-Gryphon Games with amazing art by Ian O'Toole. Now, the basic premise of Lisboa is that in 1775, the city suffered a huge earthquake somewhere in the 8-9 magnitude, which caused terrible damage, a tsunami, and then several days of fires, almost completely destroying the city. So when you start out in Lisboa, you have a city in ruins. You have all of these different rubble cubes out on the city grid. Now, I'm not going to go into a full rules description of Lisboa because it's a pretty meaty game, lots of complexity, and honestly, it's just too many details to go into. So, the basics of the game is that you are trying to clean up the city. You're trying to remove this rubble. You're having to pay to do that. You're trying to build these shops on these city streets, which are going to give you some sort of bonuses, and also possibly some victory points, which you get in the form of wigs. And then you're also trying to build these planned works, these civic works around the edge of the city, which are going to help score certain points for those shops that are already out there. Now, the heart of the game is card play. You have some multi-use cards, and you can do one of two things with them. You can either tuck them above or below your player board, that's called your portfolio, and if you do that, you're going to get some kind of bonus. If you tuck it up top, you're going to get a bonus, and then it's going to give you, at some point later in the game, maybe, some influence. And influence is a kind of secondary currency that you're going to use to take certain actions in the game. And then you're able to take some additional actions, basically making deals with the various nobles in the city. Or if you tuck it below your portfolio, it's going to give you immediately some money, and it's going to give you some sort of ongoing special ability. Maybe it gives you a discount in clearing certain types of rubble, or it gives you just a general discount of money whenever you have to spend it. Lots of different things there. Now, the other way you could play the card is instead of tucking, you just play it out to the board. The cards are going to either be one of the three nobles. There's the king, there's the builder, and then there's the prime minister. And if you play it out there, you're going to get actions associated with that noble. But that's where you're going to have to pay influence that you've hopefully collected previously to be able to take these actions. And there are some side actions you're able to take associated with each of the nobles, and then there is a main action, and those main actions are basically build a store, build a public work, or get a decree card, which is sort of an end game scoring based, it's saying if you have a certain number of stores or if you have a certain number of public works in the right sector, you'll get a certain number of points. And then what's cool, like another Vital Lacerda game, Gallerist, you can also follow, the other players can follow that if they have certain tokens they've collected, they can follow that action. But that's a little bit of the nitty gritty. Now, in addition to the nobles, there are also some treasury cards, which can give you some other special actions. Sometimes they'll give you the actions that the nobles will give you. The players just can't follow them. So you're going to continue to do this until a certain amount of rubble has been collected, or until everyone has taken a certain number of cards from the various piles. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points for your ships that you've built. Yeah, there's ships and there's shipping, which I haven't really discussed. You're going to score points for majority on certain streets of shops that you've built. You're going to score points for your various decree cards, a bunch of different things, and whoever has the most points is the winner of Lisboa. How you doing there, Raquel?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Sean?
I'm great. So, Raquel, what are your general impressions of Lisboa?
So I really love the game. So my general impressions of the game, I mean, it's a great game. It's a beautiful game. It's kind of the weight of game I like to play. And at first I was intimidated by it because it's such a beautiful game and it's big. But yeah.
So I think that it's kind of interesting you say that because I think it's helpful for our listeners to understand a little bit of your preferences. I mean, I talk about you pretty much every week on the podcast, and you've been here a couple times. You've done one featured review. You did the Stouffer Dynasty way back when, and then you'll pop up from time to time. But yeah, you generally prefer medium heavier games, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think Lisboa would definitely fit that category. No, I think this is really solid. I am a fan of Vital Lacerda. I like Kanban well enough. I really like Venus. I really like the Gallerist, and I also really like this one. There's you can kind of tell a Vital game just in the same way you can kind of tell a Feld or you can tell a Uwe Rosenberg game. You can kind of tell a Vital game, and this is pretty typical in that there are so many moving pieces that are interconnected, but that are also very thematically appropriate, I think. Everything makes a certain amount of sense, and I think that there's a certain intuitiveness to this game because you're this noble person that's trying to gain influence to help rebuild the city and gain favor with the king, etc. And everything just kind of makes sense. So, like, for example, if you're going to play a card out, say, to the board for the green noble, which I believe is the builder.
That's correct.
Thank you. Then it lets you do a couple things. You can either add some officials out to the board, which both have an effect on how much influence it costs other players to be able to do things, which is kind of interesting. In other words, you're sending out these like lobbyists out to the royal court to try and gain influence there, and make it harder for other players to gain influence there, which is really cool. But then at the same time, you're also going to need to send those officials back when you're trying to complete one of the public works, one of the public spaces, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. In other words, you've kind of exhausted their ability to lobby people in the royal court to get done what you need to get done. So I think that's really interesting, and it's really interesting how that's kind of thematically interconnected. So yeah, overall, I think it's a really solid game. It's very thinky. The first play, you and I both were taught by a listener, Joshua Acosta. He taught us at Dice Tower Con this last summer, and it was a late play, and it's a heavy game to learn. He did a great job teaching, but it was only really towards the end of the game where everything was starting to kind of fit together. And I was fortunate about a week or two after I got back from Dice Tower Con, I was able to teach and play again. So kind of really cemented the game in my mind. But yeah, no, I really like Lisboa. Well, let's talk about the components and art, which I think are really some of the high. I mean, not to say that the gameplay and mechanics aren't the high point, but certainly this game looks amazing and the components are amazing. What do you think?
I think it's probably one of the most beautiful games I've seen. There's a ongoing joke in our house about games getting put in a shadow box, and this is one that I say that has to go in a shadow box.
So first off, that would need to be like a giant shadow box, like
Yeah.
super big, and it's also like $100 game because this is one of the Eagle-Gryphon deluxe copies, and they do a fantastic deluxe version. So we've got the Venus deluxe, we have the Gallerist deluxe, and it's just this big, huge box, really thick cardboard, lots of like solid wooden pieces. The card quality is really good. Like overall, the components on this are simply amazing. Amazing.
I agree.
And then when you take into account the look of the game, the art, so it's art by Ian O'Toole, who does a lot of Vital's games. And I love his art style, but I also love the way that this game is done. This game is so blue.
And I think the blue is what makes it like really pop.
Right. Well, it's almost like it's like these hand-drawn blueprints. That is, I mean, there's plenty of other color, right? Like, but it's all these like pastels, like these muted colors. It's similar in a lot of ways to the Gallerist that had a lot of pastels and muted colors, but in that it was more of an like a modern art design. Here, it's this I don't know, Renaissance era. Like I said, hand-drawn blueprints, and I think it's just beautiful. But I also think it could be a little confusing. It kind of lets areas kind of
It kind of drowns out some of the important things on the board and it makes it a little harder to see.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that for an initial teach, that might make things a little bit difficult. But I think once you've got the game down, I think it's pretty easy to figure things out.
I mean, and everything, there's little descriptions everywhere of what you need to do here and there. But once you know where to look, then it's much easier.
Right. And then the other thing to talk about is the iconography, because you have a bunch of different places where you need to interpret things. So like on your cards, you have the bonuses and sometimes penalties of when you're tucking the cards. And sometimes they're pretty straightforward. Like it's, you tuck this and you get a particular good. So there are tools, there's gold, there's books, and there's silk. So that's pretty straightforward. Other times it might say you get a discount on a certain type of rubble
or it'll
removal.
combine one or two of the different things. And
right.
But I think like the great thing is you have this pretty massive player aid. And if you know where to look in the player aid, you can find exactly what those icons.
Right, because I think the icons aren't always clear. In fact, sometimes there's a little bit of inconsistency where like you're receiving coins for doing certain things, but it uses a plus sometimes and a minus other times. A little unclear. But you're right, the player aid is amazing. It's basically like a half sheet, like a half an 8.5 by 11 size.
Yeah.
But it's a booklet.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, 8-10 pages.
Yeah.
And it has pretty much everything you need to reference during a game.
I think my favorite part about it is the clergy tiles, because there's so many.
Right.
And they're numbered, and you just go to the page with the clergy tiles.
Right. So we didn't really talk about the clergy tiles, but basically these are some bonuses that you can get, some little ways that you can break the game. And you start off with one at the beginning of the game, and then as like if you're taking some of the king's actions, one of them is to move the little clergy. There's a little clergy track, little circuit, and you're able to pick up certain tiles. Then you can also spend those tiles once the clergy track makes a full circle, which is how you're going to score a point or score influence for the cards that you've already tucked at the top.
Yeah, the nobles you have tucked.
Right. And then also you score wigs, victory points, for the clergy tiles that you choose to discard.
Because each of them is different. Like
yeah, they're like 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So just more of that whole interconnectedness, like just lots of moving pieces. I mean, definitely in terms of complexity, this is heavier. But yeah, I think the player aid is just fantastic because it like on the back side, it's kind of your overview of how a whole turn works. You either do this or you do this, and if you do this, then you do these things. If you do this, you do these things, and then it references the inside where it has all the specific actions. Because I think what's clear about most Vital games is that every action, there's like 8 steps you have to do.
Yeah.
And you want to do them in order. Like, for example, a cool thing is when you're building a store, a lot of times in games when you're doing something and there's some bonus associated with where you're choosing to place it, you usually get that after it's completed, after you've paid all the costs and whatnot. Here, you actually get that ahead of time as you're doing it. So there's a couple spots that give you money, and if you actually need that money to help complete,
pay for it,
you can do that. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think the rulebook is really solid. Did you have a chance to really go through the rulebook?
I kind of skimmed through it, and it looks amazing, but I didn't really go into too much detail with it.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard to say, like, because it does a really good job of breaking things down, and I talk a lot about like color coding and rule books to kind of help break things out and make it easier to comprehend stuff, and it does a lot of that. And I think it's solid. Like I had some issues with the Gallerist rulebook, but I think that this is probably I think this is really solid. I'm trying to think back, like going back and referencing things in the rule book when we needed to, because for the most part, the player aid covers
everything.
90% of what you need. There might be some little details that you need to look up, but I think it's a solid rule book altogether. Well, let's spend some time really talking about the meat of the game. So yeah, what specifically, what have you enjoyed about Lisboa?
My favorite thing, as in most games, is some kind of track, or I really really like the decree cards.
Okay.
I love. I mean, like I already said, it's just beautiful to look at. But I love the individual player boards, and I don't know. There's just so much to go into.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a ton here. Well, let's talk about those decree cards. I think that one thing that Alex always likes to kind of mention is if there are multiple paths to victory in this game, because there's a lot of different ways to score those wigs. Because like I kind of mentioned in the rules overview, you can score them by having more buildings, more stores of a particular color than other players, because there's a majority scoring at the end of the game. You can score points by completing, not completing more public works, but basically there's a certain number of officials that are required to send back on each little contract that you have.
Yeah, the
plan
plans.
that you have.
Yeah.
And so you add those up, and there's some majority scoring there. So those are ways to score. And then there are ways to score things throughout the game. If you have certain clergy tiles that might say, if you, like you had one in our last play last night or 2 nights ago that said whenever you take a decree card,
I get an extra. I get a wig every time. Yeah.
Right. So you were incentivized to just get a bunch of decree cards.
Right, and even like when I was building stores and stuff like that, I was going for the spots that specifically gave me a decree card. Or
Right. So there are ways, like you could just take the action, but there are other like little bonuses here or there, which is cool. I like that whenever there's these little bonuses for doing certain things in the game, so you can kind of feel clever and feel like you're chaining these combos together.
Right.
I really like that.
And I think, with the decree cards, like if you don't watch very carefully, if you let somebody take the majority of them, they can run away with the game. Although that wasn't the case this time.
Yeah, you had a ton of them, but you didn't necessarily like you were taking them, but you weren't necessarily trying to maximize the points you would get.
Right, because I kind of felt like I had a slower start in the game.
Yeah.
Because both you and Cameron had so much influence out there that it was hard for me to visit any of the nobles, like by placing a card.
Right.
But so I didn't have like a specific plan. I kind of feel like with this game, you kind of have to have a general idea of what you're going to go for.
So like on some of the decree cards, like I said in the rules overview, some might say, for every building you have on the gold street, you would get 2 wigs at the end of the game. Or it might say for every building anyone has on the gold street, you get 1 point. So it's really cool if you can get both of those, and then you can have, like 2 or 3 buildings on gold and score 6 points that way, and then someone else has like a building or 2.
Yeah, and you don't even have to have anything with one of the decree cards as long as there's people on there.
Right. But what I'm saying is if you have both of those, there are ways where you can get the decree cards where they kind of build off each other.
Right.
Which can really be helpful. Like for the most part, you're either looking at those decree cards early and then trying to build towards them, or you're just trying to snag up the ones you want later in the game because they kind of fit what you've already done.
Right.
And I think both paths are pretty viable there.
Yeah. And like I said, I collected a lot of decree cards and it was based off of my clergy tile. And I think I kind of ignored building early on too. So, but yeah, it's.
So, and the other things you have to worry about in this game, well, not necessarily worry about, but things you can do, there's shipping, right? So you can build ships that other players can then ship their goods on. So those players will get money for shipping, but then you'll score points. You'll score wigs if they're using your ship. Right. And money can get pretty tight, and so shipping's a pretty viable way to ship goods. But at the same time, you also need to get goods.
Yeah.
And there are little incremental ways to get goods here and there. Like you can get a bonus of, oh, here, I just get a gold or I get a silk or whatever. But you can also produce goods with your stores.
Right.
But then you have to have stores. You have to take the action, I believe it's the Prime Minister action, one of the side actions that lets you produce. And then they're only producing one each.
And then, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
But you have bonuses that you can build up. Whenever you build a store, you remove one of these houses from your board, which gives you these extra bonuses, and one of those could be extra production. But then you'll also have to really worry, like, okay, I produce I produced these four gold and these 3 silk and whatever. But you have a limit of how many goods of each type you can keep. And at the start of the game, you can only have 2 goods of each type, 2 cards in your portfolio that's tucked above or below. And you need to basically collect sets of rubble to increase that.
Yeah, by building stores and
right.
So, and those are like one of the most important things, because I caught myself early on when I went to go produce and I realized, oh, I only have a max of 2, and why am I going to produce and have to waste all these goods?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, you definitely need to, you need to be planning ahead. It's like, okay, I really want to do this. I want to do, action X. But before I do action X, I have to do action Y. Okay, before Y, I have to do Z. Oh, crap. Action Z is not going to be that efficient unless I do this other thing first. Do I really need to worry about that? Or should I just take this less efficient action? And yeah, so there's a ton of planning here.
Yeah, and I think, you kind of need to balance everything out, but you kind of want to have a good idea of what you want to do as far as your path to victory, but you can't ignore any of those tracks or any of the areas where you could score victory points.
Right. So, like, the other thing too, like you were talking about influence, right? Like we cut you off in this last game pretty early on those early actions, because my first couple actions were me just sending a bunch of officials out to the board. So basically, if you're playing a card out to the board to take one of the noble actions, you have to spend influence from your little influence track equal to the number of opponents' officials on that particular noble. And so if we're talking like 4 or 5 influence you have to spend, and you start the game with somewhere around 4, 5, 6.
I think it's 5.
Well, it depends on your turn order.
Okay.
Then that can go pretty quickly. So now you have to start thinking, okay, I need to take actions that are going to gain me influence.
And there's not very many places where you can really gain influence.
Right. Like, certainly there are some bonus abilities you can get that will give you influence, but you will have had to have built first or something, but that requires you to have spent the influence. You can build ships, which is one good way to get influence. You can have your, the clergy go around on the track and then discard a clergy tile to gain influence.
But you have to make sure that you actually have a noble card with influence tucked.
Tucked, right.
Because if not, it doesn't do you any good.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy, all of the planning that you have to do in it.
I almost feel like every time we play, I need to play immediately after in order for me to like get a good game in.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much, and it's not until around mid to end part of the game that I really start feeling like I'm getting
right. Well, and so you've played 3 times, correct?
Yes.
You've played at all 3 player counts. You played 4, 2, and 3.
Correct.
Or 4, 3, and 2. I don't know that the order is important.
Yeah.
So I've gotten 5 plays in. Most of those have been at 4 players, and then I've had 1 at 3 and 1 at 2. What do you think about the different play counts?
I think that 2, it's good at all play counts, but I think 2 is not quite enough. But I feel like 3 is the best.
Okay.
I feel like 4 maybe could get too long and drawn out. Just especially if anybody doesn't know how to play. But 3 is, I think, the solid spot.
I think 3 is really solid for teaching. I think I might prefer 4, though, even though it's probably going to be a decent amount longer than a 3 or a 2-player game. But what I like about 4, and it's also what slows it down, is I feel like there's more opportunity for following.
Yeah.
So I mentioned following briefly in the rules, but basically one of the side actions of the king's space is you're able to take one of the crown tiles. and there's a crown tile for each
For
noble.
each of the 3 nobles.
Right. And you can never have more than one of each at a time. And basically when someone takes the king action, and then if you have one of the red crown, the king tile essentially, you're able to spend that, pay the influence to take one of the king actions, which is cool. And I like that because like the Gallerist has that. It can kind of bog things down a little bit if people aren't on the ball with it. But I also find that I'm often looking at what I want to do, and it's based on, well, who can follow? Like, I don't necessarily want to give someone an opportunity to follow
Because it's
right
almost like an extra
now.
turn.
Well, it's an extra turn, and at some point they're gonna get that extra turn. But maybe I don't want to give them an extra action of this just now.
Right.
I'd be fine with it later for whatever reason, because maybe I'm trying to get to a certain store, or I don't know.
I know, like at the end of our last game, I thought you were going to play to the builder, and I was kind of banking on that because that was the only tile I had, and you didn't. You just played a treasury card,
Right?
Because I think you knew that I was kind of hoping for that.
Yeah. So this game is really solid. Like it's really good, and I feel like we've only even touched on 60% of what's in this game. I mean, it is pretty intimidating. I don't want to say I was intimidated when I first sat down to this because I knew what was involved. I had kickstarted this, and I knew what to expect from a Vital game. And when I look back at other Vital games, like really the only one that kind of stresses me out is Kanban, because I feel like every time I play Kanban, I have to completely relearn Kanban, like just completely relearn it. With Vinos, I don't know, because we haven't really gone back and played Vinos.
We haven't played it for quite a while.
No, we haven't played it in yeah, you're right, quite a while. And we had originally the Z-Man / What's Your Game production. We do have the new deluxe one from Eagle-Gryphon. But with like Gallerist, I feel like I can go back to Gallerist, quick skim of the rules for a quick refresher, and I'm good. I feel like at this point now, I'm really solid on this game. And I feel like I've got a pretty decent teach down in my mind. I
would agree.
And I feel like I feel like I'm ready to play this pretty much at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I could too. I need maybe a basic refresher, but I think I'm good to teach too, though.
Oh yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the theme here. And so real quick, I'm going to just kind of read a couple highlights from the intro of the rulebook. So on November 1st, 1755, on All Saints' Day, Lisboa suffered an earthquake of an estimated magnitude 8.5 to 9.0, followed by a tsunami and 3 days of fire. The city was almost completely destroyed. The Marquis of Pombal, Sebastian Jose de Carvalho e Melo, oh boy, was the prime minister at the time, and the king put him in charge of the reconstruction of Lisboa. The king and the prime minister immediately launched efforts to rebuild the city. On December 4th, 1755, a little more than a month after the catastrophe, the chief engineer of the realm, Manuel de Maya, presented his plan to rebuild Lisboa. Maya presented 5 options, including abandoning Lisboa altogether, rebuilding with recycled ruins, widening the streets, and even building a completely new city. The chosen plan boldly proposed raising the entire Bahia quarter and laying out new streets without restraint. In less than a year, the city was cleared of debris. Because the king wanted to have a new and perfectly ordered city, he commissioned the construction of big squares, straight, large avenues, and widened streets, with related types of businesses as if each street had its own motto, Abaya de Lisboa. I don't know what that means. So the game of Lisboa is set over a span of 22 years, and then you're playing the roles of influential nobles who survived the earthquake, tsunami, and fires, and who will help in the reconstruction and economic development of the new city to receive graces from the king and the marquis. You will work with the architects to build Lisboa new in order to gain influence, and the most important thing of all, wigs. And we're talking like kind of, those Renaissance-y wigs, which is VPs in this game for some reason. So do you think this captures that feel? Is this a thematic play experience?
I definitely think it is. Especially with all the different tracks and all the different, all that's going on with the game. Even like when you're building on the streets, they're like, it looks like broken like rubble and like the buildings. And I feel like it is very thematic.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, kind of what you said, but in addition, man, it's these officials. Like my head is wrapped around these officials. You want to send out the officials to the court, basically, to the royal court, to gain influence, but also to make it so that it's harder for other players to use their influence. I said that before, but I think that's so cool. And then once you want to build these planned works, these city works, you have to then send them back, like you've used their services. And for whatever reason, like that really captures my imagination, like the intrigue at court and things like that. So yeah, I think in that sense, it's definitely thematic. I think that you have this card play, which is really interesting. You have a hand of 5 cards, and we didn't really talk about this, but your hand will change throughout the game because basically you have a starter hand of cards, and then you have the rest of the cards you're able to draw one at a time after you complete your turn, but you get to pick, right? So you will almost always have access to a green card, a blue card, a red card, or a treasury card until those particular piles run out. So you have a lot of control here. Like it's not super random in the sense of, oh, I hope I really draw a green card.
Right.
You have that control there. And with that, I think, there's some tough decisions to be made because it's like, well, I really need to build. Should I draw this green card? Because I have a green crown tile that I could use and hopefully someone will play it. And I could just follow.
Right.
But what if they don't,
Or do I have enough influence to even follow? Or because you still have to pay influence if you're following.
Right. But I'm just talking in terms of like make that decision of do I draw that card now or draw? Oh man, there's a really sweet treasury card that's
or
really
there's
good.
Gold or just something that you need.
Because you're looking not just at the type of card, but also maybe the bonuses that you might get if you were to tuck it or whatever. Like that all needs to kind of come into play when you're making that decision. And I think thematically, because that's really what we're talking about, I think thematically you're deciding how you want to spend your time trying to influence the royal court. And I think that's really cool. I really like that.
Yeah.
And then what else is cool is that once we're done with our starter hand and we're done with the first era cards, we then get a whole new hand of cards, and the abilities get better and stronger and cooler.
And you can actually keep your cards from the previous era, but
if you want to.
I mean, there's not really many reasons to, but sometimes there's 1 or 2 cards that'll.
Right. Yeah, and you get bonuses for discarding certain cards at the change in eras. But overall, I think that is a really rich thematic experience, and I think that Vital Lacerda is probably the master at creating these heavy games, like these really heavy, rules complex games that still feel thematically tied. The mechanics feel tied to what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Whether it's running this wine business in Vinos or running this modern art gallery in the Gallerist or running an automobile factory in Kanban. I mean, he is really good at this. Like, it's a really solid effort, I think. I mean, not only are these thematic for being, like, super thematic for being heavy games, but they're just really, I think, really thematic, period.
I agree. And, like, he puts so much into it. There's so many little things here and there, and they all just tie together very well.
Well, let's real quick before we go to our final thoughts, let's head on over to the guild. We had a couple contributors there. So Evan said, "I'm a huge Vital Lacerda fan and own 3 of his games: The Gallerist, Vinos, and this. Well, I find Vinos to be good, not great. The Gallerist is a borderline top 10 game for me. However, Lisboa cranks things up a notch and is a special game in my mind. It is rare that a game can offer so many interesting choices and strategic depth while being drenched in a theme so integrated with the mechanisms, you actually feel like you're influencing nobles and rebuilding a city. The graphic design and artwork are impeccable, which contribute to make this less a game and more an experience. While I do share others' criticisms that the decree cards are unduly influential in determining who wins, that is but a minor complaint. I have played this 5 times since receiving my Kickstarter copy in August, and I look forward to each subsequent play. This is my second favorite game of all time, behind only Great Western Trail, and is an easy 6 out of 6 for me on the ducal scale. So I think some similar thoughts there with Evan.
And Daniel Newman says, Lisboa is amazing. Lacerda is one of my all-time favorite designers, and Lisboa is right up there with Kanban as one of my top 5 games of all time. My only complaint is it's a bit tough to get to the table due to the length of play and the complicated teach. It is not quite a school night game.
And that's probably true.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, man, I struggle teaching not all of Lacerda's games, but I almost have to work myself up into the mindset like, okay, I'm gonna teach this game. Like
It's going to be 40 minutes before we even start the game.
Yeah, exactly. So Megan Naxer said, a brief history. Vital Lacerda is my favorite designer. I picked up Vinos pretty quickly after we were getting back into the hobby, as we wanted a heavier game in our collection, and the theme is awesome. Picked up The Gallerist with the Vinos Deluxe Kickstarter and continued to really enjoy it. Lisboa was one of my most anticipated games of the year, and I couldn't wait for Origins, where I not only would get to pick up my Kickstarter copy, but also meet Vital Lacerda, and he is so kind and wonderful. We punched the bits at Origins, and I'm continually amazed by the production of these deluxe games, and Ian O'Toole's art is drool-worthy. After we got home, I sat down with the rulebook and really enjoyed reading it. The history of the city is fascinating and makes me want to visit, and like all the previous games, the theme really comes to life when you're playing. The multi-use cards are really cool, and I love the way the whole game comes together. My first few plays had me trying to figure out what I want to do, and then puzzling out how to get done with the cards in my hand. After 5 plays, I'm starting to reverse that and just see opportunities in the cards I have and draft and work from there. There is so much to explore in this game, and I'm loving it more and more with each play. Contender for my Game of the Year 2017. 6 out of 6 on the ducal scale. Yeah, I think definitely another strong opinion from Megan. I mean, I agree again a lot with what she says here. It's super solid.
And Paul Naxter had to say, Lisboa seems to be a step up from The Gallerist in every respect. While the theme did not grab me, the choices are even more complex and interwoven than before. I find it to be a challenge to wrap my mind around how so many small choices ripple throughout the rest of my game. Small mistakes add up very quickly. I'm not in love with this one, but I am up for the challenge. And he gave it a 4 out of 6.
All right. So some interesting thoughts from the guild. And before we go into our final thoughts, I'm glad you're here to help me review this game because I mean we have similar tastes in games, which I think makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We tend to play things a lot together. And I really wanted Alex to review this because he's reviewed Kanban, he's reviewed The Gallerist, and he tends to like Vital games. And for whatever reason, he's just like, I just don't want to play this game, and I don't understand.
He has to. He should. Like somebody said, it's an experience. It's not just.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for helping me review this.
Thanks for bearing with me, everybody.
No, you're doing great. So let's do final thoughts then. So why don't you start us off? What are your final thoughts of Lisboa? I have to think about the name of the game for a second. Final thoughts of Lisboa, and then your final rating.
So as you know, we're talking about it. It makes me want to play it more and more and more.
Yeah.
And obviously with Chewy and just other things, I can't play games as often. But I almost feel like until I play it more, I need to play it twice in a row to really get a full experience. But I'm always up for playing it. It's beautiful. It's very thematic. And in some ways, it reminds me of a Feld. And that's my favorite designer.
A super Feld.
Yeah, a super Feld. With the respect that there's so many things, so much just going on in the game. But yeah, I mean, I want to say, at first I was like, oh, it's a 6 of 6. But just because it's so hard to get to the table, I think because I want to play it more than once, I would have to give it a 5.
And just for clarification, here at the Dukes of Dice, we work on a 6-point scale. A 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. A 6 is an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. And so you're saying it's a 5. A great game will rarely turn down a play of it, right?
Yes, that's correct. And I think, I mean, as I play it more, it could possibly move up to a 6.
Okay. I think that's fair. So, yeah, it's a 5. Like it's this game is a 5 for me as well. A great game. Will rarely turn down a play of it. And I'm just trying to kind of rank it in my head with the other Lacerda games. I definitely like it more than Kanban. It's hard to say with Venus. Like we need to play Venus again really soon. It's really close with the Gallerist. I really like the Gallerist, and I think the Gallerist does a lot of cool things. For whatever reason, I feel like in my mind, this is more intuitive once you understand how the game works. And maybe I feel like that's not what intuitive means. Like intuitive should mean like, well, things make sense without me really knowing why they make sense. Like I feel like it's pretty complex, and it takes a while to really understand what's going on. But then once I understand what's going on, then it feels intuitive. And I still don't know if that makes sense or not. But I'm sticking with that. I'm sticking with that impression. Yeah, I think that this is fantastic. It is a fantastic production, fantastic art, fantastic components. The gameplay is so solid. The number of choices that you're making here, you know whether to follow, because maybe I don't want to follow now because I'm not quite set up to do what I wanted to do, or man, I need to do this, but I can't do this until I do these other 3 things first. But then there's this opportunity to grab this particular thing, which isn't part of my plan, but maybe I just need to jump on it.
It sounds like you have AP right now.
I do. Well, no. Hey. I can entertain all of those thoughts. It's the manner or the time in which it takes me to crunch them all and come out with a desired choice. So thank you very much. I'll leave it at that. No, but I mean, that's the thing is I like when I'm presented with all of these choices. It's not fun to play a game and be like, oh, well, that's the obvious choice. Oh, I do this. Oh, I do this. Oh, I do like here you have to really figure this out. And yeah, it can potentially be an AP nightmare for some people because there are so many things to consider. Even just drawing a card at the end of the turn. Like it's not just a matter of, oh, I really need a green card. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's like, so I don't really care what color card I get. I don't really care about that particular treasury card. But man, that bonus on that one card is really cool. I would love to tuck that into my portfolio. And having to kind of weigh those things, weigh all the endgame scoring, whether you're going to ship. No, this game is really solid. So yeah, it's a 5. A great game will rarely turn down a play of it. Well, all right, that's going to do it for our review of Lisboa. A 5 from Raquel and a 5 from Sean. Essen 2017 has come and gone, and at the show, TMG debuted 3 new games, and there's an expected release pretty soon here. So you can check out Pioneer Days, which is a dice drafting game taking place on the Oregon Trail. While you pursue your strategy, you must be prepared for impending disasters such as storms, disease, raids, and famine. You can also check out Exodus Fleet. Now, Exodus Fleet features resource management and tableau building mechanisms along with a highly interactive system of role selection and bidding in which players compete to hire miners, spaceship builders, and other groups to piece together their own fleet to escape a dying Earth. Just building the ships and filling them with refugees will score you points, but making sure your ships work together may give you the advantage that you need. Finally, you could check out Harvest, which is a new game designed by Trey Chambers, who designed Argent the Consortium. This is a game where you are minding the fields of Gull's Bottom. You'll plant and fertilize your seeds, tend your crops, and utilize the various buildings at your disposal. You'll need to work smarter, not harder, as harvest season is coming to an end. Who will have the best harvest this year? Will it be you? Well, will it? So anyway, those are some great new titles coming out from TMG, and you can check out those and all their other awesome titles at playtmg.com.
Hey there, everybody. Mean Duke Alex coming to you from the Hampton Inn here at PAX Unplugged, right across the street from the Philadelphia Convention Center, the city of brotherly love. I'm all full up on cheesesteak. It is early Saturday a.m. after... we got here on Wednesday, setting up early for Gray Fox Games. My first time ever running a booth at a con, so a lot of my con has been tied up in that. Not a ton of new plays to talk about, but I'll run through a couple and then give you a sense of what PAX Unplugged is like. First one is a Carl Chuddick game called The Bird Told Me to Do It. It's from Chaka Games, and it's odd title, For folks who don't know who Carl Chudik is, he's the designer of Glory to Rome, Duke's favorite Matainai, as well as a game called Red 7, Innovation. He's done a lot, typically with multi-use cards. This game, no exception. You are basically building out tree limbs with these multi-use cards that have different colors of birds on them. The majority of those birds score once you can't play to the trunk anymore, and then the whole tree resets and you keep playing until someone has 30 points. It's set up to create some really interesting, crazy combos, but this game has been dogged pretty heavily on BGG. I think last I checked it was in the 5s somewhere, and I think for good reason. It just it didn't click for me so much. It didn't live up to the standard. Felt a little too long for what it needed to be, and a little more swingy than you probably wanted it to be, like a lot of Carl's stuff, but this one just didn't click. The other new play just came late Friday night here at Dice Tower Con, and it was a big first for me. I got to play my first ever game at the table with the one and only Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower. I've known Tom for a couple of years now in the context of being a part of the Dice Tower network, and this was my first ever time playing a game with him. And the reason that's a huge milestone for me is, or for folks who might have heard the Holding Court episode where I interviewed him, Tom is the reason I got into board gaming. I saw a video of Pandemic online. I did a little research, found a local gaming club, played Settlers in person, played Pandemic in person, and I was absolutely hooked from there. And so it was kind of a full circle moment for me, now being in the industry and also now getting to play with a guy who I've admired as a media content creator and a guy who really helped. I wouldn't be here without him, I'm pretty sure, in many ways. So huge thanks to Tom. Got to play Pulsar 2849. That's a CGE game, and if you are a fan of Feld, you will be a fan of this one. It's a dice drafting game, and then you will, after drafting those dice, spend them on a wide array of actions that do a wide array of different things. This is going to be right up Sean's alley. I don't know if he's played this one or not. If he has, I probably wasn't listening close enough, and I feel really bad about that. It's really solid. If you're a Feld fan, this is again right up your alley. You're going to dig it. Tons of different ways to score points, multiple paths to victory, point salad to its core, but some really cool stuff with technologies and tech trees in a way that normally I wouldn't like, but this was definitely an Alex game too. Strong recommendation for Pulsar 2849, and yes, I did come out on top, not out of the 4 players, but I did beat Tom, so good enough for me, and happy to do it, and hopefully he was happy to do it. He seemed to really dig that game in general. Pulsar 2849, worth checking out, and just a cool moment for me as a gamer. Ran into a bunch of folks familiar to folks on the podcast. Mandy Hutchinson's here demoing for Renegade Game Studio, similar to what I was doing at Gen Con. Dan King is here. He's been moseying about. Saw Mark Street from Board Game Corner. Level 99, local Albuquerque companies here. Said hi to those folks. North Star Games, who we're close with. So, all the usual players are here, but it's kind of a weird split because I know a ton of people are out at BGG Con right now, and it's definitely a different crowd here. This crowd at PAX is much larger. My understanding is it's more than 20,000 tickets sold to this event, which certainly dwarfs the attendance of something like BGG. The crowd itself, maybe a little less hardcore though, as best I can tell. Certainly slightly more of a casual audience, which maybe is to be expected. It's centered around that PAX brand, and hard to know what to expect from the first year of a convention like a PAX. You get cons that are more selling conventions, like Gen Con is a huge industry con, all the new hotness there. You can play games, but there are some barriers to that you don't have at, say, a Dice Tower Con, where all of the hot new games are out on the tables, ready to go, no tickets needed, just first come, first serve, and usually it's not too long of a wait to get in the new hotness from Essen or just about anything. So very different experiences at Gen Con versus a Dice Tower Con. This is a true hybrid. You have a big vendor hall, but not necessarily the hardcore folks there picking up all the hotness. You get a lot of folks demoing. Casual games seem to be doing better as best I can tell from talking to some other folks and checking our own sales. And the play area is really nice. The new hotness is easily accessible. Plenty of tables. And a really nice casual feel. It was kind of funny when I was sitting down to play Pulsar with Tom. We were short a person, and I think at a BGG con, if Tom Vassell's looking for a player at a game, it ain't going to be hard for someone to just stop right up and come play it. At the very least, he's going to get interrupted a bunch of times during the game from folks wanting to thank him for his work on the Dice Tower, et cetera, et cetera. Same would go at Dice Tower Con. Not the case here. It took longer than you would expect for Tom Vassell to find a fourth person to come to the table, and there wasn't a lot of look of recognition like, oh, I love your stuff, but I got to do something else kind of thing. It was, no, thanks, sorry. So that maybe gives you some insight into the type of crowd. Certainly different than the BGG folks that you might expect. If I were here as straight media, I think it would be fantastic. You have enough of the big vendors with enough of their new stuff to where it's easy enough to go around getting review copies, and yet there's still plenty of play areas to demo all the new hotness and get new plays under your belt and get reviews out quickly. I'm not in that position. I'm working and not getting in a ton of new plays, but that gives you a sense of what this con is, and I think for the casual regular attendee, it's going to be plenty of fun. That being said, I hope they're not at the same time next year, because I definitely miss plenty of the folks who are down at BGG Con, which is for me last year was a lot of fun, and I know there are plenty of folks here who are bummed to be missing it right now. So that's the recap as of Saturday AM. We're expecting a huge day tomorrow with the weekend crowds, folks off work. We'll see what it's like there in that con hall. We're expecting it to be packed. We'll see if that pans out. Until the next update, me and Duke Alex signing off for now. All right, hey folks, Alex here on a big time Saturday afternoon at PAX Unplugged, and I'm here with Dan King, the Game Boy Geek, who I keep bumping into because he's over in my same hotel. Dan, how's this con been for you, man?
It's been cold. I'm not used to being in a cold weather climate for a convention. It feels very weird because every convention we're at, we are walking around the streets, there's lots of humidity, everyone's sweating, we're wearing shorts, and you get to Philly in November, and I have been freezing my butt off. Literally was shivering last night walking home.
So here's the thing. With St. Louis, it's about this temperature right now anyway. So not much of a change for me, but from Arizona, yeah, I can imagine that's a bit of a shift.
I left 80 degrees, and I'm waiting to wear shorts.
So I was talking the other night in sort of this episode that's going out about how this is a different con as far as a feel from any that I've experienced. It's sort of a hybrid, really, between a Dice Tower con or a BGG con and a Gen Con, in that you have pretty good exhibitor presence, but there's a ton of play space.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I can compare this to is I said it feels like an Origins. It's set up much like an Origins too, and from looking at the people, you guys can't see this right now, but Alex and I are up in the media room, and we get to look through this cool third level window overlooking the entire convention hall. It's people are walking around in the different booths, and when you look at the amount of people that are out here, I'd say it's probably a little bit busier than what I saw at Origins, but the amount of space that's here for not only the exhibit hall and the amount of space for the play area, it's very similar to, say, Origins. Now, if you've never been there and you can't put that in your head, if you've ever been to BGG Con, I'd say the total amount of exhibitors here is probably pretty close to equal if you're talking about all of the two different rooms that's in the BGG Con exhibit hall, but the floor space is just one big hall, so it might feel bigger, but I think it's probably about the same amount of like booths themselves.
But then you look over to the play area, kind of over to our left here, and it is jam-packed.
It's crazy. Yesterday, Friday, wasn't too bad. They have a first look area where I got there right when the doors opened and got to play, some games there yesterday. Today, I mean, there's hundreds of tables over there. Again, if you've been to BGG Con, it's probably, I'd say, about as big as that big hall room with all those tables at BGG Con. And yeah, there's no, I barely got a space this morning, and we're looking right now, and there's no space. It is absolutely packed, but this is going to be the busiest day and time of the convention. But there's also way over in the corner a very huge main theater, which is hooked up really nice with lights and tons of chairs, and that's where they're doing a lot of the big shows. I think the Dice Tower did their top 10 there earlier today, and they're doing a lot of panels there too. But it's really cool. I was afraid it was going to be too spread out here, but it's literally everything's right in the same area.
Got it. What are some of the favorites you've been playing? Because I've been a little bit too busy working to get a ton of new stuff in. But even you were mentioning your new play count is not as high as it might normally be.
No.
But you got in a couple of good ones so far. What are some things that have caught your eye, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually been really busy too. Even though I don't have anything officially that I'm doing here, I am just here to scope it out, but I've also had a lot of work meetings with different publishers and things we're trying to do. But
hustling for promos.
Wow, man, Kickstarter's this is the week that Kickstarter prep starts. But yeah, no, I'd say let's just talk about two games that I played. One is, like nothing else I've ever played before, and quite honestly is probably going to be on my short list for most innovative game of the year. It's sort of a mass market game. It's called Drop Mix, and if you haven't heard, and I'd never heard of it until I got here.
Is that right? Had you really not heard of it?
Really had not.
Wow.
And which is crazy because I am a musician and I'm a gamer, and this is like I am the exact target audience for this. So Drop Mix, what it is, it's made by Harmonix, which is the same people that did like Guitar Hero, Rock Band, stuff like that. So it's basically a light card game where it has a lot of electronics built in. See, there's a platform, and each of the platform has like 4 or 5 slots, and these slots have different colors on them, like blues, greens, and some of the colors are on multiple slots. It's integrated with either your phone or an iPad, and the app goes through and tells you what types of things you need to throw down. And cards basically have different colors, they have different instruments on them, they have different volume levels, 1, 2, and 3. And essentially when you play a card, if it says play a 1 volume level, if I play that like a green card in the green slot, it has to be at least the same volume level or higher. But then there's some synergies, like if you play a card, it might say, hey, if you've already played a card with drums, you can now play another card with drums or something like that. So there's some synergies there. So it is a light card game, but it's got enough going on that it's interesting. But the biggest thing about this is when you play these cards, all of them are pieces of music that are licensed. So they might have like the bass line of like Another One Bites of Dust, and then they have like the keys of like a Billy Joel song, and then they'll have the vocals of like a TLC song. And you start throwing these cards down, and literally they're making a mashup of these songs.
And they sound good.
They do. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. Like I was so like enamored by just the idea of it that even though it's super light, it has 3 modes. It has 2, like 1 versus 1. It has 2 team versus team, and it also has a cooperative mode. And honestly, it's not a super deep game, but the whole experience is like nothing I've ever experienced before. It's really cool.
I don't think I'm going to be able to talk Sean into actually reviewing that one for the show. I don't know if it's something you're going to review for the channel.
I'm actually going to try to, but I don't know. I was thinking about, I didn't see them for sale here, but they're about $70 online.
Yeah, Amazon had them, I think, 75 last I checked, and maybe there'll be a Black Friday deal on that or something.
I hope it goes big because I know that they already have a lot of like extra packs you can buy.
Yeah.
And I'm like waiting. My dream is that like, because when they did Guitar Hero, I was in a regionally traveling band as a saxophone player.
I thought they were rock band.
Rock band, rock band. So when they did that originally, like one of the main things they did was they allowed indie bands to like upload their songs to their network, and then people could like download those songs and play Rock Band with those songs. And I always thought that was like the coolest thing about that. And I could just envision like how this works is like each of these cards has an RFID chip in it, and so it knows what's being played. It would be the coolest thing if like they figured out a way to allow people to use their favorite indie artists and be able to take different parts of their different songs and make their own mashup of their own band. Maybe it's like stock card art or whatever, but at least it has the chip in there. They could like program it. Like I'm like thinking this could be like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it is. It is half toy, half game. I don't know if the core game itself is necessarily that good. I haven't played it personally, but I have messed around with the freestyle mode, and that was fun enough in and of itself to have me almost pull the trigger on buying it. That thing's really cool.
It's weird because I think it's light enough that my wife would enjoy it, but it's also... I was playing it with the Cabal guys and Board Game Replay, and like we're gamers and we still enjoyed it. So I think it's the interesting thing that I think it can appeal to a lot of different groups.
Very cool. What else did you get in that you liked?
Let's see. I'll talk about one more. I played Werebeasts from Bezier Games. This is they just did a Kickstarter recently about this, and it's not like a social deduction game. It's like a bluffing game where they have all these different Werebeasts. So they have a Werebago, a Were-NATO, like a tornado, a Winnebago. My favorite, the Were-Nana. They have all these different like weird things that have the word Were in front of it, and the artwork's on it's awesome. And what you're trying to do is have the most points at the end, because the people to your left and right you share a secret goal with. So Alex, you and I are sitting next to each other, and there's a piece right next to us, and we get to flip it and look at it at the beginning of the game, and let's just say our secret thing is Were-Nana. Well, to my left I get to do the same, and to your right you get to do the same. So you know what you share with the player to your left and your right. And when it's the player's turn, they flip over a card, and it's one of these different types. Let's say they bring up a Werebago. Everyone starts bidding with like how much they're willing to give that person in order to take that card. So you're bidding with a currency called Were-Chow. It's like little cans of, it looks like little cans of tuna, but it's like Were-Chow.
All right.
Or you can bid with the cards that you already have in front of you, because you're going to gather cards throughout the game. So you're bidding with cards, you're bidding with money. It's negotiation, and your people are gathering sets. So you're trying to gather the points of the cards that are on either side of you secretly, but you can't be too obvious, because at any point in time on a player's turn, they can accuse you of saying one of the two things you're secretly trying to collect, and if they get it, out of the game, you're out. But if they're wrong, they're out of the game. So stakes are high. So as it goes on, you're bluffing, you're trying to collect things they don't think they're doing. But since you know what's on your left and right, the way people bid is really interesting, because you can be like, oh, what's the other thing this person's collecting? Well, what's the person on the other side collecting? So there's a lot of meta stuff going on. It's a really fun bluffing game, and we just had a blast with it.
Fantastic. Dan, fantastic seeing you as always. I'm sure we'll be bumping into each other a lot more conventions.
Yeah, man. It was great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Thanks, Dan. Hey there, everybody. Mean Duke Alex with a lot less of a voice than I probably had for the first two of these. It is Saturday night at PAX Unplugged, wrapped up for the day at the booth, and no new games to talk about, but probably need to sign this off some way, somehow from here. Hope Sean has a fun time editing this. Hope everyone had fun, whether it was at BGG-Con, at PAX, or at home. Happy Thanksgiving to all, and be curious to see. I think Sean's coming out here next year, at least that's the plan, and I think he'll have a heck of a lot of fun. He'll certainly be able to get a lot more new plays in than me, but for now, talk to you later, and see you in a couple weeks. Me and Duke Alex signing off from PAX.
Well, thanks to Alex. Sounds like he had a great time out there at PAX Unplugged, and appreciate the coverage over there. Before we wind up this episode, we're going to talk about our runners-up for naming episode 164. Raquel, you're going to help me out with that, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So first, Chris Graves suggested Rocky Lisboa, which is a play on Rocky Balboa, right? The Stallone character, the boxer who's from Philadelphia. So Rocky, and since Alex is in Philadelphia for PAX Unplugged, so that makes perfect sense. Rocky Lisboa. Good job, Chris.
And Ben Coberly recommended City of Rubberly Love.
Rubbly Love.
I write it always.
So, of course, that's a play on City of Brotherly Love, hence the rubberly love. Rubberly love? Sure, why not? Again, Philadelphia, and the fact that Lisboa was in ruins, right?
Yes.
So, Daniel Newman, with a little assist from BJ from Board Game Gumbo, suggested Lisboa Constructor, which is a play on Boa Constrictor, which I think that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes. And John Knost, It's Always Sunny in Lisboa, just like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah. And in fact, I asked on the Guild just to confirm when John posted that. I said, so in this situation, Alex is Charlie, right? The Charlie Day character from... You haven't really watched much Always Sunny, right?
No.
Yeah. You've probably seen bits and pieces of it when I've had it on.
Yeah, I think so. I think the last time I watched a full episode was when I was pregnant.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's been a while. But yeah, Alex is definitely Charlie. So, but yeah, that one makes a lot of sense too. And then finally, John Giblin suggested Rocky Roads. Again, another reference to Rocky the Boxer, the Sylvester Stallone character. And of course, the roads are rocky in Lisboa when it's full of rubble. So,
and I want to eat Rocky Road after I finish playing.
Okay, that's you always want to eat Rocky Road though. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Guild. We really appreciate all those efforts. Fantastic contributions there. And just want to say thanks again, Raquel, for helping us out. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 164, which we've titled Philly Cheesequake, thanks to our buddy Chris Holm. Until next time, for Alex, this is Sean.
And Raquel.
And Duke you later. Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded at various times in the Duchy and in Philadelphia on the week of November 13th, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Arcane Wonders. Check out all their awesome titles at PlayTMG.com and ArcaneWonders.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!